Hi, my name is Martin Purnell, and welcome to Off-Grid Christianity, a weekly podcast for those who go or don't go to church, and where we can meet and hear from those that have made their faith count. You can contact us by email, ogc@accessradio.biz. Biz is spelled B-I-Z. Please enjoy today's guest, who has been a financial advisor in wealth management, an ordained minister, fundraiser, and now an author of an instant apostle publication entitled Generous with a capital G. With this kind of background, is it any wonder our guest is now the head of giving at Evangelical Alliance? Our guest's start in adult life couldn't have been much worse in the UK. She was unemployed, homeless and pregnant. How did our guest change her life around? Why does she want to become an ordained minister? How has her financial background in finance helped or hindered our guest's understanding of giving, let alone money itself? What were the miraculous promptings that got her to write the book, Generous with a capital G? What is her giving role at EA, Evangelical Alliance, all about? And what does our guest think of blessing others? And what does she see when age 16 about receiving any blessing herself? It gives me great pleasure to welcome today to Off-Grid Christianity, and that is the Reverend Wendy Pawsey, but I presume I can call you Wendy, is that all right?
Martin, you can definitely call me Wendy, and thank you so much for inviting me on. It's a real pleasure.
Oh, well, thank you. That means I don't have to send you an invoice afterwards then. Or is it the other way around? That'd be the other way around, wouldn't it? Yeah. Where are we talking to you from today, please?
So I'm currently sitting in my living room in my home, which is in the beautiful village of Chinnar in Oxfordshire, surrounded by the Chiltern Hills, and the sun has come out, which has made me very happy.
And if people are saying, that doesn't sound like an Oxfordshire accent to me, we'll find out exactly where you're from in a few minutes' time, but that's all right. But meanwhile, let's do the 5 important or not so important questions. Let's find a bit more about you. So question 1, Wendy, if you could invite anybody from history for an evening meal, alive or dead, so that you could ask them questions, who would it be?
If I could take another degree, it would be in history. I love looking at history and the way that it's impacted and changed the world, and really trying to get into the minds of those who have done certain things.
Yeah.
So I played about would I want to speak to Ho Chi Minh or Margaret Thatcher or Genghis Khan? And I've landed on Henry VIII and just try to understand how he went from this supposedly delightful little boy to someone that you really didn't want to be married to.
That's a great answer.
Thank you.
Don't think we've ever had Henry VIII before, considering that he started up a certain sect, I suppose it would have been called at that time, before it then became what we know now as the Church of England. What would you expect for him to say to you?
I have no idea what I'd expect him to say to me. Hopefully not, will you marry me? Because that would be scary. There are so many books written about Henry VIII and about his wives and about his court, but we don't really know how much of what we read is true. So I would like to just maybe try and get the essence of who the man was.
Yeah.
Fascinating, how he interacted. Oh, I just think it'd be so fascinating, because the world we live in today has been changed because of him.
Absolutely. It'd be interesting as well if you said, we have an expression over here, WWJD. What would Jesus do? How does that apply to you, old Harry? What do you think?
Yeah, I think he'd probably deny all of that, or twist it to his own way of thinking.
Yes. Well, the other thing, of course, then, is that if you're going to invite him round for an evening meal, you have to cook him food. So what would you cook old Henry?
You know what? I didn't even think of that, because the question that you sent to me was if you could invite anybody from history for an evening meal. Because I don't particularly like cooking. I read that I was going to go to him.
Oh!
But if I'm cooking, obviously, this is Henry VIII. Meat has got to be a big thing. I'm not going to be able to get away with a hummus starter, some chicken, and then a trifle for dessert. It's going to have to be a massive banquet. Lots of meat. And probably meat that, to be honest, you're not going to buy in your local Tesco's.
Well, at least you're going for it. Fair play. Although I'd love to see how much money you're going to be spending on the meat. That should be good.
I'm not even a big meat eater.
Oh, right.
Just such a good host. I'll do that for Henry VIII.
Humility in action, yet again. Question 2. Who is your favourite biblical character, Wendy? Or favourite biblical story? Or favourite parable, please?
I love Peter because I love his enthusiasm. I love his passion. I love the fact that he gets things wrong. That encourages me massively, that he gets things wrong. I've got great admiration for Queen Esther because she makes the best of a bad situation. Yes. I think I'm going to go for King David. We know that he got a lot wrong, but 1 Chronicles 29 for this season, it's probably my favourite Bible story where he's raising money for the temple. And he knows that it's not going to be him that's building a temple because he's got blood on his hand. That honour is going to go to his son Solomon. But he stands there and he's gathered together all of the most influential men within his lands. He's gathered them all and he takes them on this amazing journey of telling them about the temple is going to be built. The temple needs to be built. God has said it needs to be built. I'm not going to do it. Solomon's going to do it. He pulls them all in by getting them to support Solomon, agreeing to support Solomon. He tells them how, in great detail, the temple's going to be built, what he personally is going to give. And then he lays down that challenge, who is willing to consecrate themselves to the Lord today. And we know that they respond amazingly and they give and they give and they give. And I just love that story. I find that so encouraging, and I find it encouraging for a whole number of reasons. I just think it is the template for how you do a good ask in church or anywhere, to be fair.
Yeah, very good answer. We've had David a few times before, by the way.
Sorry about that.
No, that's all right. We've also had Balaam's ass as well. So, yes, we've had quite a few diverse answers. David is absolutely cracking. And I think most people would maybe realise now that actually when you go to church on a Sunday or wherever and you read a psalm, the chances are that it was one of the psalms written by David.
Yeah.
He is more flawed than most of us today. As you said, he had blood on his hands.
Oh, yeah.
Consequently, hey, nobody's perfect.
And I think that's the beauty. When we read through the Bible and we read about our ancestors that have gone before us, they got stuff wrong.
Yeah.
And God forgave them and they continued with their life and they continued doing good and bad, but God still journeyed alongside them. That's so encouraging because there's only ever been one perfect human to walk the earth, and that was Jesus. The rest of us are flawed human beings with everything that brings.
Don't tell my son that. I think he still thinks I'm perfect. If you believe that.
How old is your son?
In his 20s.
He no longer thinks you're perfect.
I think he's known that for quite a few years, actually. It's round about when you're 7, isn't it, that you start to realise, oh, my parents aren't quite perfect.
And then through the teenage years, you know for definite, my parents are not perfect.
Yeah. Question 3. This will be interesting. You can have a frivolous answer or a proper, genuine, really important answer, or both.
Okay.
If you were Prime Minister of the day and could change any law or impose a new law, young Wendy, what would it be, please?
Gosh, I'm going to expand this again. You've been very generous and you've allowed me to have 2 answers, but I'm going to push it a bit and I'm going to go with 3.
Oh, ho, ho.
I know. Give me an inch and I'll take a mile.
Go for it.
We've got the assisted suicide piece of legislation that's going through at the moment.
Yes.
I would like to just get rid of that.
Because?
Because when we look at the other countries where this bit of legislation has gone through, it started with lots of safety guards in place. And they've gradually be watered down. And there's no reason to think that wouldn't happen within our country. And there's other reasons as well beyond that. That's my first one.
Very good. Nice one. See if you can get that through Parliament. Well, actually, you are Prime Minister, so you can get it through in real life. Yeah, good luck with that one.
The power.
Yeah.
And then the other one is the Abortion Act 1967.
Mm-hmm.
At the moment, you can legally have an abortion up to 23 weeks and 6 days of pregnancy. Babies born at sort of 21, 22 weeks can live. Mm-hmm. I would rejig that act massively. We have a Both Lives initiative at the Evangelical Alliance that's there to help pregnant mum consider all options because we know the number of abortions are increasing. And I think that's quite often because people think they only have one option, where there's lots of different options. And I know that, that is such an emotive subject. So, I've just done a very sort of broad brushstroke answer to that one. My frivolous one would be, I'm going to come across as such an old grump now.
No, that's my job.
Well, what drives me absolutely crackers is when you're at a train station, or actually it could be anywhere, and you're walking up the stairs and there's a lot of traffic and you get stuck behind someone who's really slow. And I appreciate that, some people walk slower than others, and that's fine. And I'm going to be 49 this year. I definitely walk slower than what I did when I was 29. But sometimes you've just got places to go.
Yeah.
So I think we need a fast and a slow lane, just like they do on escalators at train stations. I think we need a fast and a slow lane on stairs.
Brilliant.
Gosh, I've come across so grumpy.
No, it's called Communal Garden Sense. I'm going to vote for you on that one.
Fantastic. I think we'd get that through.
I think get that one through. The other two, I'm not so sure, because you've chosen probably the two most emotional subjects I think have been discussed in political history over the past 20, 30 years. And yeah, question 4. Outside of family events, Wendy, what has been your most enjoyable day out, please?
Last year we visited LPO, which is like a spring harvest in France.
Oh, really?
Oh, it's amazing. It's for anyone who hasn't been there, it's well worth going. So this year I'm one of the speakers there in June. Salt Mine's there on the same week, but they have amazing speakers there all the time. It's fantastic. It's absolutely brilliant now. I love it. And we drove out one day to go to a water park. I haven't been to a water park, like a big water park, in so many years. And it was me, my husband, our daughter, who would have been 13. And we just spent the whole day. We got VIP passes, so we didn't really have to queue.
Yeah.
And we spent the whole day just walking up these steps with no one in front of us and just going down the water slides. It was fantastic. It was brilliant. I absolutely loved it. But I didn't feel my 48 years. It took me back to feeling, I don't know, ridiculously young. Just going down, screaming down a water slide, just having so much fun.
That's a great answer. LPO. I've never heard of it. What does LPO stand for and where is it based?
I'm so going to butcher the French.
Le
Pas Opton. And it's in Western France. It is brilliant. Great value for money. A real family holiday.
And how good is your French if you're going to be speaking, he says, hoping that there might be an interpreter there?
No, it's the majority of people there are English.
Oh, really?
It is literally spring harvest in France. And so the speakers, they speak English. The majority of people that are there are English.
Oh.
There's kids clubs. There's a swimming pool. Everyone stays in caravans or you can camp. There's a little it's quite a big stream at the bottom of the camp where you can take canoes out. You're right near the beach. It is amazing.
Question 5. What has been your most embarrassing moment then, please?
I don't very often get embarrassed anymore. Or if I do, it's not something that tends to stay with me. It'll be a momentary thing. So I was really racking my brains of all the things that have stayed with me that I've done and they've been really embarrassing. And I'm not saying I don't still do embarrassing things. I think I just cope with them better. There was an interview that sprang to mind that would have happened about 2 decades ago. And it was for a big financial institution. How can I put this? This was back in the days where, political correctness and sexual equality wasn't maybe as prevalent as what it is now.
Yes.
The guy who interviewed me said to me, "Oh no, I don't want to interview you in the office, Wendy. A lot of the colleagues that you'll be working with are male, and there may be certain comments made, etc., etc., etc. I don't want to put you off of the role." I think, well, I'm actually incredibly put off of the role right now.
Yeah.
We're meeting in a coffee shop. So I said, "Yeah, absolutely no problem." And it wasn't a problem meeting in a coffee shop, apart from the fact that I didn't, and I still don't like coffee. And at that point, I didn't like tea, which left me with only one option, really, which was hot chocolate. When it came to ordering the drink, I ordered hot chocolate and I drank my hot chocolate. And the interview went well. And I travelled home from the city of London to Barking, which was probably about, I don't know, maybe about a 40, 50-minute journey.
Yeah.
Got home to my house, let myself in, took my shoes off, took my coat off. And as I walked past, looked in the mirror, and I had a big chocolate moustache. This wasn't a subtle chocolate moustache. This was a big chocolate moustache.
Monsieur Poirot type sort of moustache.
Oh, even bigger than that. If you think of the Joker from the Batman movie, it was more like that, but brown. And the guy who interviewed me, he did invite me back for a second interview. But I said no, because I just couldn't face him again. But no, I travelled all this way home. No one had told me. And
that was the only time he met Mark Zuckerberg. Look what had happened. Well, where should we go on this podcast? There's so much to discuss. I'd like, though, if that's all right, just to get a bit serious here. I did mention right at the very beginning that at 16 you were unemployed, homeless and pregnant. What do you remember of that time yourself and all the pressure that might have been put on you to have an abortion? What can you share, please?
They was tough times. I mean, if I give you a little bit a little bit of my history.
Please.
So I'm the youngest of 3 children. My brother and sister are 8.5 and 10 years older than me. I grew up in a very, very, very happy household, mum and dad, surrounded by family. You know, we lived in the middle of this estate in Custom House in the East End of London. Loved my school life. I was captain of a lot of different teams and the football, gymnastics, hockey team. Absolutely loved it. Fantastic life. Went up to secondary school, again, all going well. My teenage years were awful in one way, in that, first of all, my maternal granddad died, then my paternal nan, and then my dad died, which was just absolutely horrific. This was all before I was 13.
Right.
And then after that, I had a growth along my spine that apparently got to the size of a grapefruit. But the doctors thought I was attention seeking. So it wasn't until right towards the until basically I had no movement whatsoever in my left leg and I was in a lot of pain that they admitted me to the London hospital and they found this growth. And even that was a pretty traumatic time in that I got put on the same ward, which was an adult ward that my dad had been on. So that brought back an awful lot of memories. Oh gosh, there was a man across in a bed opposite me who, I was 13 years old, who kept on exposing himself. Another teenage girl that was on the ward with me got assaulted whilst we was there. Eventually they thankfully moved me on to the children's ward, and at this point I'm 14, where a visitor said something very, very, very untoward. And my family was incredibly upset about that. So I got moved into, still on a children's ward, but into my own room, which was much, much better. And I had the operation, 10 days bed rest, but we didn't know what the recovery was going to be, whether I'd be in a wheelchair, whether I'd have a very bad limp. But, you know, God is really, really, really good. And, you know, it's part of my testimony that I did get healed at a later date, but I got healed. That was pretty much, you know, some of the formative teenage years. And I went a little bit off of the rails, to be honest. Me and another girl, we had a little gang of people who would go out shoplifting for us and we would sell stuff. I had keys for my school. I had some people who would do my homework for me. We used to throw parties in one of my friends' houses and sell tickets. You know, I was a little bit, actually, no, I was very, very, very naughty. And I was also, at this point, I would go out pubbing and clubbing.
Yes.
At a party, not a pub or a club, but at a party where I met my now husband. And he was standing there with his brother and his cousin. And I looked at all of my 2 friends who was there with me, were both with boyfriends. And I looked at the 3 of them and I thought, oh gosh, I really, really, really like that one with the black hair and the red jumper. And I walked past him a few times and smiled. I walked past him to go to the ladies' toilet. Maybe he thought I had a stomach issue. I walked past him so many times. But I walked past him and I was thinking, gosh, is he ever going to ask me to dance? And on the very, very last song, which was I Am Sailing, he asked me to dance. You know, I wasn't a Christian at this point. At this point, I was quite tipsy and I started singing really loudly, I Am Sailing. And God did not bless me with a good voice. And this boy that I've just met put his hand over my mouth. And no one ever dared to do things like that. And I thought, gosh, I really like this. I asked him how old he was. He said he was 19. I'm 15 at this point. He said to me, how old are you? And I said, I'm 17. I gave him my telephone number. Went home, told my mum I've met someone, you know, like she said to me, I was a party. I said, I met this boy, I really liked giving him my telephone number. She said, how old is he? And I said, he's 17. Anyway, we arranged to meet. He came to pick me up on the Thursday in his car. My mum thinks he's 17. He thinks I'm 17. To be honest, we pretty much immediately fell in love. And, you know, we'd see each other every single night. Eventually, I had to tell him that I wasn't 17. It was about 3 months in and I was actually 15. And he said to me, well, it's too late now. I love you. So he got quite a lot of stick off of his friends that he was dating a 15-year-old.
Yeah.
But it was roughly about a year later that I found out I was pregnant. And at this point, I wasn't living with my mum, which is a whole nother story, but I was living with my nan. And my nan said to me, Wendy, you can't stay with me. I'm too old to be able to cope with this. So I had to declare myself homeless. He declared himself homeless as well. And we lived in a homeless shelter down Hope Road in Barking. We lived there for 6 weeks. At that point, I was, maybe 2 months pregnant. I was working for a company down Fleet Street. And it was one day before my 3-month probation period was at an end. And I'd had really, really good reviews all the way through. And I told them that I was pregnant. It would have been about 9:30 in the morning. At midday, they let me go. So I had no job, no home. It was a really, really, really tough time. We eventually got a flat. We was only in that homeless unit for 6 weeks. We got a flat. It was on the second floor of a high rise, again in Barking. We had a drug dealer who lived on the floor below us. People would often mistake whose flat was who, and we'd have people coming knocking at the door wanting to buy this, that and the other. That was always interesting conversations. It was a really, really trying time. There was a lot of pressure to not have Reese, who's our eldest son. He's going to be 32 this year. All of my children are amazing. I'm completely biased. Ben, who's going to be 28 in a couple of weeks, and Freya, who's 15 this year. Wow. But if I think about Reese, there was so much pressure for us not to have him. We was told it will ruin your life. It did make life a lot tougher, having a little baby. But it also brought a lot of sunshine and a lot of pleasure and a lot of love into our lives and our families' lives. So all those people who said to us, you shouldn't have this baby, the second they knew that we was going to have him, they loved him. They loved him. They journeyed with us. They've showered love upon him and upon our other 2 children. And the thought that he almost didn't, actually there is no he almost didn't exist. It was never a consideration. Me and my husband never considered getting rid of him. That was never something that was on the table. The thought that if we'd not been so strong in what we believed, and there wasn't any hint of Christianity in there at that moment, it was just our moral beliefs. The thought that Reese wouldn't have existed is absolutely heartbreaking. He's handsome, he's married, he's successful, he's kind. He's one of the loveliest people that you could ever meet.
But he's not a Bristol City supporter, so he's just missing out on the pinnacle.
Well, no, I think that's part of what makes him one of the loveliest, wisest people you could ever meet.
Yeah, good comeback. The thing is, what you've shared, and I thank you so much for that, you must have shared this quite a few times. What kind of feedback do you get from the people when you're sharing it?
This is what comes back most of the time. Oh, you've done really well. Not that there's anything wrong with living in a flat. There's nothing wrong with that. We loved our time in our flat that we was first in. We loved our time in the flats when we was at Bible college. Most of the time people are really surprised that, oh, you're not in the flat. You've moved on from being in the flat. Yes, we did. Life progresses, life goes on. I mean, and if I pick up from after Reese was born, so I got pregnant at 16, Reese came along when I was 17. At 18, we got engaged. At 19, we had a big white wedding. At 20, I got pregnant with Ben and we bought our first house.
Wow.
And then go forward a few more years. At 23, I become a Christian. It was an exciting time. I know someone, they was in our church for a little while. He got his girlfriend pregnant when he was 16. And he was told his life was over. Him and the girl didn't stay together. They went their separate ways. Their son is now 15, 16. The dad, so the person I'm talking about, he went on to get married. He got his degree. He's got a really good job. He's got married to someone else and they've got children.
Yeah.
Life does move on. Life does go on. And I'm a strong believer in life is what you make it. God has a plan and a purpose for each and every one of us, and it's a plan to prosper us. Do I think me getting pregnant at 16 was part of God's plan? No, I really don't. But even though I didn't realise it at the time, God helped me through that situation. Yeah. God helped me make the best of it. He helped me see the opportunities. I'm a great believer in education. I'm a great believer in really pushing yourself to be the best you can be, whatever that looks like for the individual. And if I look back on our lives, mine and my husband's name is Marcus, we've done that the whole way through. It's been really, really, really hard work. We both at one point was working 6-day weeks and, it's been really hard work, but you do it.
For those that are listening today then that are parents and are maybe coming to terms with the fact that one of their children has come home saying they're either got a girlfriend pregnant or, they're pregnant. From your point of view now, their emotions as parents must be all over the place.
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
Keep the lines of communication open. Talk to your child. Find out where they're at. Find out how they got to this situation and what they want to do moving forward. And then support them 100% in that. We were so blessed, me and Marcus. We've got a good family. You know, it may not sound like it, 16 and homeless, but we've got a good family. And they come round and they loved us and they supported us. Silly things like they looked after, at the time it was the boys, Freya wasn't born, they looked after our boys so we could work. When we was very, very first together and we was living in our flat, we would go and we'd eat round other people's houses for dinner because we couldn't afford to feed ourselves. You know, there wasn't a lot of social security help. There wasn't a lot of it available. So if we hadn't have had that, we would have gone really, really hungry. But people helped us. I mean, I remember when we were saving up for the wedding, we used to shop a lot in Iceland and down the market. We used to make £15, which obviously inflation and, you know, £15 went a lot further than what it does now.
Yeah.
£15 was our food bill for me, Marcus and Reese for the week. I was only working part-time. So I'd say to him, you know, what do you want for lunch today, Reese? And he was only little and he might say something like a crisp sandwich. But I didn't have money for 2 bags of crisps. So we'd share a bag of crisps or ice lollies. Could never afford ice lollies from a shop because they're always so much more expensive than what they are if you buy them in a box from a supermarket. So there was these little things that we had to sacrifice. But it's not a big sacrifice at the end of the day because there was the 3 of us. We was all healthy and we was happy. That's worth so much.
I mean, if we were able to get Reese involved in this conversation now, what do you think would he say about his growing up years?
Well, we talk about this, and recently we was having this discussion because I was asked to write my testimony for our Both Lives initiative. I wanted to ask his permission before I did so because obviously this is all about him.
Yeah.
I mean, our circumstances changed very quickly. You know, it was only maybe a matter of 6-7 years before both me and Marcus were financial advisors. So our circumstances, you know, it was a quick change. But he says he always felt loved. He always knew that he was loved and that he was important and that he doesn't remember ever going without. He never remembers going without. I think the perspective from a parent is completely different to the perspective of a child.
How much stress do we put ourselves at that time when we're going through this stuff, where actually it's not as bad as we think it is? Especially from Reese's point of view and other children's point of view?
I think as parents, we always put stress on ourselves. We always want what's best for our children. We always want to provide as much as we can. You know, and I'm so guilty of this. And this is where I'm speaking from. I can't speak for anyone else but myself. Sometimes when I look back, I think, you know, did they really need that? Was that really important? You know, I think you do get a bit wiser as you get older because you've lived a bit more. You've got these experiences behind you. So with Reese and Ben, our first 2 children, there was stuff that was so important and, you know, so key, like their GCSE results. We all really stressed over that. Their GCSE options, we really stressed over that. I probably put a lot more stress on them than what they needed or what was healthy for them. Where with Freya, our 3rd child, life has been so much easier because I just think, you know what, that's not massively important. So she's not getting her number bonds by age 6. She'll get it. She's not walking by a year old, which she didn't because she was such a little chubster. She will walk eventually. It's not the end of the world. All these little things, our GCSE options, when it comes to choosing what she was going to do, I now know that actually, and, you know, this is my opinion as a parent, many parents will disagree with me, it's more important for her, or my opinion is it's more important for her to do GCSEs that she enjoys, that she thinks she's going to get a good mark in, than ones that I think are important. So we walked around and we went into different classrooms and some of them she said, nah, I'm not feeling it. And we walked straight back out. I would never have allowed the boys to do that. I just think your perspective changes when it comes to family time, when everyone comes down. And we've got one of those coming up at Mother's Day. The mothers come down. My husband, you know, he's so blessed. His dad is still with us. His dad comes down as well. My 2 sons and their wife and partner, they come. And we'll all sit around the table and we will just have an amazing time. The food is completely unimportant. It's the people that are there that are important. And we've done the same at Christmas. At Christmas, we had Boxing Day, I think it was. There was 14, 15 of us, all for Boxing Day around my house. Was so not worried about the food. Didn't want to poison anyone, so I made sure the turkey was cooked. But everything else, you know, if the potatoes weren't perfect, who cares? completely unimportant. What was important is that we sat there as family and we could do that as family.
Yeah.
And I think it's looking actually where are the priorities. That I think is, as parents, sometimes what we need to really take a step back and think about, actually, is it important that they have this designer piece of clothing on, this new toy, or is it important that they just have something
Yeah.
and that they know they're loved and they are valued?
And there was a great advert in the 70s, 80s. I think it was for Sony Trinitron TVs. The picture was of the kids playing inside the big box that TVs used to arrive in.
Yeah.
That was it. You saw them playing in the box, and the punchline was TV included for the parents. There you go. What can a cardboard box do? Loads of things. It was a cracking advert. I think it's important that people realise that actually it's more important to look on the outside of what can happen as a result. You are a living testimony, as is Marcus, as are your 3 children. Life will continue, but it can actually be a lot better than you think it is currently. Around about the 1990s now, if I bring church into this, church was maybe beginning to change, but certainly in the 1970s, if you were single, pregnant, they would look down upon you, and things had to change. What can a church do now that in the past they didn't do? What has the church learned?
So my experience with churches in relation to this have only been incredibly positive. Outside of church, it was different. I mean, there was people who wouldn't talk to me. I'd be at a bus stop, we'd be chatting away, and they'd find out I was Reese's mum and not his sister, and they would not talk to me. I had someone say to me, a friend from my childhood's mum, say to me when she found out I was pregnant, your dad would turn in his grave. So outside of church, people could be really, really cruel. But in church, I've had nothing but love and acceptance, which maybe I've been incredibly fortunate in that. Or maybe it's the way I've positioned it, so there hasn't been the opportunity for anyone to come back with anything negative. But if I think back to my first visit to a church, which was just after we'd got saved at a tent mission, I rocked up as this early 20-something-year-old in a pair of tight red PVC trousers, hipster trousers, completely see-through top with 2 pieces of strategically placed fur, because I was not happy being one of these Christians. God was fine, Jesus was fine, happy to acknowledge them and be part of their gang. No idea who the Holy Spirit was, but I did not want to be a church-going Christian. All I got was love. You know what was said to me on that first day by the pastor, Godfrey Fern, who is an amazing man of God, shook my hand as I was leaving and said, you have a lovely smile, and then moved straight on, shook my husband's hand. But we never, ever, ever had any condemnation whatsoever.
Wow.
Absolutely brilliant. Now I'm a minister, co-pastor with my husband Marcus, and we will get people come in who have got a family, but they're not married.
Yeah.
And we just love them, because everyone is on a journey. We all get stuff wrong. And I want to be someone who loves others, who's an encourager, not a discourager. And when we think about Jesus with the adulterous woman, and he said, let him without sin cast the first stone. Let's look in the mirror and redirect that back to ourselves.
If we take some of your earlier answers, David, for instance, How many wives did he have? How many concubines did he have? You're telling me that you fathered all those children inside a marriage? I don't think so. We still hold David up as a pedestal of, well, he must have been a really good bloke.
Yeah.
But as we say, we're all flawed. I really thank you for your encouragement on this as well, and the fact that you're able to now fly the flag to say, do you know what? Just come on in. For you yourself then, just close this particular history lesson on the life and times of Wendy. What would you like to say in closing?
To close off my early years, I would say that they was a refining time. They was a time of discovering who I am, what I believe, what my aspirations and values were and still are, but also determining what is important. And for me, that really came down once I became a Christian, which I know we haven't really talked about, but once I became a Christian, it was always a 3-pronged approach to God, family, church. So I always make sure that God is there. He's a priority. Then it's family. Psalm 127:3, my children are a gift from God. They are a blessing from God. They are important. They will only ever have one mum. The church I serve in will have lots of different pastors. The Evangelical Alliance had fundraisers before me. They'll have fundraisers after me. My children will only have one mum. And hopefully Marcus will only ever have one wife. And it's just really, really thinking, what are those priorities? And I think those early years build up a whole well of tenacity and determination, but also honed what is important.
So, let's talk about how you became a Christian then. What happened?
If I look back over my life, no one in my family was what you would call a Christian. They would say, oh, we're C of A. I was about probably 11 before I realised that C of A stood for Church of England. We never ever went to church. We didn't go at Easter. We didn't go at Christmas. We just did not go. But if I look back at all my New Year resolution slips of paper from when I was a child, they've all got talk to God more, pray more. Like literally for years and years and years, that's what I would have. And I used to spend a lot of time sleeping with my nan and granddad's every single weekend. And my nan used to say that she'd put me upstairs to bed and then she would sit on the stairs. This was when I was about 4, 5, 6. And she said she'd sit on the stairs and she would listen to me because I'd be speaking in a funny language. She said it would be a conversation. She said because I would pause while someone else answered. I would laugh. But she couldn't understand it, which I'm now thinking back. I must have been speaking in tongues. It must have been a conversation with the Holy Spirit because there was always that knowledge, that awareness, even though we didn't go to church. And even though I got chucked out or asked to leave a church summer program, I don't think that was my fault. Who doesn't want to see whether their butterfly cake can fly?
But no, really? That's why you're asked to leave?
Well, and I wanted to see if a few other people's butterfly cakes could fly because mine didn't. If I go into my teenage years, when I was about 11, 12, I took part in a church play that my friend's cousin was part of how cliche is this, to replace the lead on the Anglican church roof. But it was all Christians who was doing the play, they was the actors and the actresses. But I was part of that and I would still see them occasionally because one of them was a bus driver and he let me get on the bus once for free because I only had a £10 note and buses back then were only 40 pence and he didn't have the change. So all these things stayed with me. I think what was a real sort of turning point is my husband's nan. We used to park outside her house every morning to walk to the train station to get the train to work. And she would pull back the curtain as we drew up and she would wave to us. And what we didn't realise that she was also praying for us. And she would invite us to the various different things that was going on at the church. Sometimes we'd go, sometimes we didn't. She would take our children along, who are great-grandchildren and our own grandchildren. She'd take them as well to any summer activities that the church were doing. One year the church was doing a tent mission. It was for 10 nights and she was singing in the choir and it didn't end till about 10 o'clock. And she said to us, no one can give me a lift home. So I'm going to need someone from the family to come every night just so you can give me a lift home. Well, we later found out that what a little liar she was because anyone in that church would have given her a lift home. But it just meant that every night, different members of the family had to be there. Our night was a Saturday night, which, that was going out party night.
Yeah.
Love this lady. Her name's Ruth. She's no longer with us. She's been promoted to glory. But love Ruth, so obviously we're going to do it. So we get babysitters and we go along to this tent mission. And if you're going to be there, you might as well be there. So we're sitting in the second row. The person who shook our hand as we came in was surprising because they looked so normal. The worship surprised me even more because it wasn't dire. It was good. It was fun. The little drama skit was funny. So I was starting to think, oh my word, these Christians are, they're normal.
Yeah.
And then a gentleman called Reverend Paul Epton got up and he spoke. And it was like he was speaking directly into my heart. And then he said, okay, we're going to have a time now where you can respond. You can give your life to Jesus. So you can have some privacy. I'm going to ask everyone to bow their heads and close their eyes. He then asked those people who wanted to know Jesus more to raise their hands. So I raised my hand. And then I put my hand back down again when he asked us to open our eyes. And he said, right, 7 of you have raised your hands. We want you to come out to the front. We want you to receive a pack that we've got. We want to bless you with it, rah, 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 rah. But when he said 7 of you, he pointed and he didn't point at me. So I thought, he's not going to point at all 7 people, but he didn't point at me. So I've immediately thought, I'm not good enough. God doesn't want me. I was such a party girl at this point. If there was a table to dance on, I would dance on it. The famous Liz Hurley dress with the safety pins down the side. I had the mini skirt, like the mini dress version. I was such a party girl, and I thought, I'm not good enough for God. Unbeknown to me, Marcus had also put his hand up, and he knows none of what's going on in my mind right now, my heart. So he's gone walking off to get his welcome pack. So I'm sitting there, and I just felt like the best present in the world had been given to me and then immediately taken away. And I wanted to cry. I wanted to cry so much, but I thought, I am not going to cry in front of these Christians who think I'm not good enough for them. And so I got angry instead. And then they started the healing part of the meeting. And they asked for those of us in the first 3 rows to take our chairs and move to the back. So not only am I sitting there thinking I'm not good enough, they're now asking me to get to the back of the tent. So I've done that, and the healing started, and people were, they're going up for prayer and they're falling to the floor. And I thought, oh, come on. What a load of rubbish this is. God, if you're real, heal me. I mentioned when we first chatted that I'd had a back operation, growth the size of a small grapefruit had been removed from my back. I've still got numbness on my left hip, but at that point, and I'd worked so hard to strengthen my core to get rid of any limp, so I no longer had a limp. I still don't have a limp, but I had a weakness along my spine, and particularly in my neck. And if I bent my head back, I couldn't bring it back up without giving a little bit of support with my hand. And I would be on paracetamols and ibuprofen, especially in the colder weather. So I thought, okay, God, if you're real, heal me. And I went stropping forward to the front, all angry. And Godfrey, who later became my pastor, asked me very nicely, very gently, what's wrong? What can I pray for? And I pretty much barked it in what was wrong. And they prayed for me. 2 or 3 people prayed for me, and this amazing heat just went down my spine, and I was healed. It's not my only healing over the years. It was the one that just kick-started the journey and just made me realise, actually, I might not have gone to the front, but God loves me. God is real. And I cannot express in words how life-changing that was, and just the love that I felt from God, but also the love that I felt for God in that moment. It was life-changing.
How old were you at the time?
I was about 23, 24.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And of course, we could talk about how you then got into finance and how this helped you, obviously, look after your family after going through so much pain and, the downside of life when you haven't got money. So you've seen the other side of the coin.
Yeah, I think our life has just been a whole roller coaster. I went from a really comfortable childhood where we'd go skiing in the winter because my dad had his own company. We lived on a council estate, owned our own home on a council estate, but my mum and dad were reasonably comfortable. To my dad dying, us having nothing, living in a homeless shelter, then being really poor. Well, Marcus became a financial advisor. I then followed a few years later, so life became incredibly comfortable. We then sold everything and went off to Bible college. We lived on the money from the equity from the property, which I know you'll probably want to come back to some of this. So this is like a really sort of broad overview. We had a 6-figure, it was roughly about 120,000 equity that we went off to Bible college with. To get through Bible college was 18,000 a year for our fees and for our rental, on the rent on our flat. And then we both worked as well at Bible college, myself on reception, Marcus as a gardener. But obviously you still need to buy for food. We had the 2 boys, Reese and Ben at the time. And then when we came out of Bible college, we went into an amazing church. We're still there now. They had a senior pastor. We was their minister in training. And for myself and Marcus, there was only one salary of 25,000. Our rent on this tiny little end of terrace, it was supposedly a 3-bedroom house. It was more like 2.5 bedroom house, went up to 1,250 plus our council tax. We'd lived there for about 4 years. By this point, all the money was gone, and we'd started going into our overdrafts because the banks hadn't caught up with the fact that we was no longer financial advisors. And we just didn't know what we was going to do. That roller coaster ride, have not. We was in another have not stage. There was an answer, which, we can go into in relation to housing. And I also become bivocational at that point. So we went back from, on this roller coaster of finance, we started going back up again, which was really nice because we now got 2 incomes. We've got the church income from Marcus being the full-time pastor. We've got the bivocational income coming from me being a fundraiser. It's been all the way along all the way along this up and down, up and down, up and down. And, and we're still in that journey. I live in this amazing house. A really long story behind how this house came into being and being ours, but also partly owned by the church. But the house is now up for sale. We're going to have to sell the house, buy somewhere new, and have a mortgage until Marcus is 75, and our mortgage, in all likelihood, it's going to double. But again, even in this circumstance, God has been so good and we have been blessed. But it is that whole roller coaster.
Yes.
Money isn't a constant, but God is a constant.
I can identify with so much because that's very similar to what I've gone through. Although mine was maybe not so being willing as yours was, the way you were going through it.
Yeah.
But the fact that you wanted to sell your house to fund to go to theological college, many people, and I know this from previous podcast guests, they know what God wants them to do, but they're just scared of doing it because it doesn't make sense. They've got their family to look after. I get that. They've got this to look after. They've got bills to pay. But you did it. Why? Because
it would have been crazy not to. It would have been madness to not do it. I mean, we had people all around us saying to us, are you sure this is the right thing? But we knew without a shadow of a doubt it was the right thing. Marcus had gone on 2 mission trips to Burkina Faso. He'd also taken redundancy from what used to be Abbey National because he knew God was calling him into the ministry.
Right.
I mean, all of that is his story, so I won't go into the background.
Yeah.
But when he was on the mission trip, the second mission trip to Burkina Faso, which is a 3-week trip, I knew when he went there that God was going to call him. I knew it with everything within me. It was one of those certainties. When God sort of drops something within you. And we spoke to our pastor, Godfrey, the amazing Godfrey, and he said, okay, well, Marcus, you go off, do 1 year at Bible college. So it's not a theology degree, just 1 year at Bible college. Then come back and you work in the church. Wendy, can you guys afford to live? If Wendy, you carry on working and you maintain your house, which we could. House prices weren't what they are now, so it was a lot different. So that was the plan. I mean, I was never ever ill, but in the January, the last Friday of the month, I got this headache and just felt incredibly weak, and it didn't go until about the April time. I was off of work for months. They tested me for all these different things, but we never found out what it was. But because I had this time where I was off of work and, even sometimes just holding a hairdryer, I'd have to sleep afterwards because it wore me out so much. It was just an awful time. But I wonder, looking back, whether God sort of pressed the pause button for me for a little while. I don't know that, I'm just guessing. But it was an awful time. But it did mean I had more time on my hands. So I arranged for us to go on this just looking course at the Bible College.
Which Bible college?
Regent's Theological Bible College.
Vancouver?
No. It's in Malvern.
All right. Yeah.
Malvern in Worcestershire. So I'm a trustee there now. It's a fantastic, amazing Bible college. But again, I am slightly biased. Not only am I a trustee, it was my Bible college. We went there for this just looking. I'm going there to support Marcus. And whilst we're there, bizarrely playing archery. And at this point, because I'd sat on Marcus's glasses by accident, he's got all this black tape around his glasses, not sort of sporting the best look, but we're playing archery. And I heard God so clearly say to me, you need to come to Bible college as well. So I'm thinking, oh my word. And I don't say anything to Marcus about it until we're driving home down the M6. And all of a sudden I burst into tears. I will cry over anything silly on TV, a book I'm reading, but the serious stuff, I'm like the Sahara Desert. Not 1 ounce of liquid there whatsoever. But I started crying, at which point he started laughing. That is not the way that my husband would normally respond to serious tears. He said to me, I know what you're going to say. I know exactly what you're going to say because God's told me as well. You're coming to Bible college. And I said, yeah. We both knew. We both had that confirmation that this is what God wanted. So to do anything else would have been crackers.
And the fact you checked it out as well, you spoke to your pastor about it. He suggested, You put in safety nets just in case. But the fact is, you still had to do it. That's the thing.
We still had to do it. We knew we was meant to go. So we handed in our notice at work. We changed the boys' school so that both of our boys would start a new school in September, when the college term started. And then we went for our interview at the Bible college. The lecturer, Jeff, who interviewed us, said to us, you've handed in your notice at work. You've changed your children's schools. How do you know we're going to accept you? And we said to him, we know you're going to accept us because this is of God. We know we're coming to this Bible college. But at that point, we still had nowhere to live. And they showed us a flat. Andrew Cave, amazing man of God, still at Regent's Theological College, showed us a flat. And I was like, oh gosh, I can't imagine us living here. But if that's all you've got, fantastic. The second time we went back, he said, we've got a flat you're going to love. Someone's just had to drop out, unfortunately. This flat is perfect for you. And it was. It had wood chip wallpaper. There was iron stains on the carpet. You could sit on the settee, reach out, touch the TV. You know, we had to have our wardrobes down the hallway. The shower you had to wash with neat bleach. You know, the circulation was so bad. And if you sat around the kitchen room, like the dining room table, if you sat on two particular chairs, you had to get up and scrunch over as you'd hit your head on the shelf. This flat was perfect for us as a family. And we just had the best time now. We organised because we were so conscious we was moving our children away from everything they know. So we would organise run-outs with the students of a night. You know, I was a 30-year-old woman. I can remember once dressed up in nice clothes because I'd been working on reception that day, hiding in some bushes with a spider about 2 centimetres away from my face, getting ready to run to home and trying to outrun these like 18, 19-year-old students, thinking, what am I doing? But we done all these things. We done pudding parties. We organised movie nights because we knew we was where God wanted us to be, and we wanted to make it the best experience that it could be for us and for our children.
If you haven't even been told yet by someone, you need to write a book about your life history. If no one's ever said that to you yet, may I be the first person to say it? And the second part is, why haven't you even started writing as we're speaking? It'd be an amazing book. So get on with it. Now you've been told now, in brackets, please.
But why would I do that now when all they need to do is listen to us and they've got it in audio?
There is that. But let's move forward if that's all right now. You've written a book.
I have.
Let's talk about your book then. It was due to miraculous promptings. Tell me more.
Gosh, so it would have been about 8-9 years ago. We was at this conference and it's called River Camp. It no longer exists. It was called River Camp. And it was, it's a Christian festival. Well, I've never done camping. I'm going to be 49 this June. I have no intention of camping. So we was in a caravan. It's still muddy and, you're in a tent and the speakers were really loud, as in like not the actual, and the chairs were uncomfortable and it was all cramped. And, I really like carpet and concrete walls and a padded seat. That's so much more me. And our little girl Freya was only young at that point. We'd taken loads of youth to this camp and they were there, their youth part of the service. And my husband went to the adult part of the service. And I said, I think Freya needs to stay in the caravan tonight. It was more like, no, I need to stay in the caravan tonight. I could still hear every single word of what was being said in the main adult service. So we're sitting in the caravan, me and Frey. And I've heard the speaker say, there's someone listening right now and God is telling you, you need to move creatively. And this may be in blah, 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 write a book. And I thought, oh, no, that's me. God, you're speaking to me. You want me to write a book. Anyway, Marcus has come back. The first thing he said as he came in through the caravan doors was, did you hear that word for you, that God wants you to write a book? And I was like, yeah, I know. Now, I am an avid reader. At any one time, I've got about 3 books on the go at once. I love reading. I've never really had an aspiration to write a book because I read so much. I've read so many bad books. There's so many books out there. Why does the world need another book? So it's never been on my bucket list. But God has said it. So if God has said it, I'm going to do it. So I'm praying into it, praying. Didn't tell anyone because I felt a little bit unworthy of doing this. Imposter syndrome came and sort of landed on me pretty heavy. So I didn't say a word to anyone. But then over the years, people started going off to conferences and coming back and giving me journals and saying, this is for you to write your book. I was like, thank you. Taking the journal, putting it on the side and thinking, I don't know what to do with this journal, but I want to be obedient. So I started writing a fictional plot line. It was awful, but I just don't know what to do. And then at this point, I was working for Compassion. Due to go out to a trip to Kenya. 2 weeks before I'm due to go, I wake up with this word in my mind, and the word is unifundshe, spelled UNIFUNDSHE. And this word won't go. It will not leave me. It's just there constantly, just buzzing about in the back of my mind. And I've tried to rationalize it, thinking this has got to be, I'm a fundraiser. I've obviously read about a fund for women, the she part, that are at university. It makes perfect sense. Anyway, so I'm out in Kenya, beautiful part of the world, heartbreaking poverty and amazing people. And we're at this church service. It's the last day, and the pastor's up the front. And, we're just having the best time. I'm having, it's a Pentecostal church. I'm clapping, I'm dancing, just loving it. This is my spiritual home. And the pastor has said, we're about to sing some songs. They're going to come up on the screen in Swahili. Just say it as you see it. Completely butchering the Swahili language as I'm saying it as I see it, having fun. And then this word has come up, unifunche. Oh my word, one of those sort of lightning moments. And afterwards, I said to our drivers, we was all having lunch and I was sitting next to them and said to them, what does that word mean? And they said it means to teach. I was like, thank you, God, I can get rid of this terrible fictional plot. But then the question is, what is it I'm equipped to teach God's children? So I'm praying still. And I really felt actually it's all to do with generosity, all to do with finance. So I thought, okay, great, got my subject matter now. But I'm still dragging my feet a bit. And we was at a farm with really good friends of ours who we met at Bible college and they're now in the same church as us. We were standing there and our children were scratching these little piglets and like tickling them. And he said to me, and again, we haven't told these people, we haven't told these friends. He said to me, so Wendy, I really feel God is saying to me, when are you going to start writing that book that he's placed inside of you? And it scared me, to be honest. I said to him, there is no book. God hasn't placed no book inside of me. Still imposter syndrome and living in denial. And my friend said, no, he has. He has. I was like, oh, okay. So I've really got to get on with it now. And I was thinking, I do not want this book to be just my opinion, because then it's limited by my experiences. So I thought, I want to send out a survey. So I sent out a survey. Again, that whole Gideon caveat. If people come back to me, then it means it needs to go ahead. So I've sent out the survey to 75 Christians. 50 of them have responded. And reading through it was like the survey responses were such confirmation. Actually, I need to do this. Wrote the book. Took me about 8-9 months. Loved every second of it. But then there's a challenge of, what do I do after I get this published? Apparently only 1% to 2% of Christian books go with publishers and the rest are self-published. So I thought, well, I'll just have a go. I'll send it off to people and find out what happens. So I sent it off to about 8 or 9 publishers. 3 came back to me. I spoke to all 3. One of them came back to me with quite a lot of areas for improvement, which I loved. But they done what's called hybrid publishing. So hybrid publishing means that basically once everything has been done, all the copyright and the design, everything's been done, you have to buy X amount of books.
Okay.
I went with Instant Apostle, they're called. They're amazing. Went with Instant Apostle and they said to me, you have to buy 400 books. And I said, yeah, great. Which came to £2,400. We didn't have £2,400. But I was thinking, you know what? I really feel this is of God, so something's going to happen. I was thinking, the book is coming out. I need to promote this book. So I went to speak to Steve at St Andrew's Bookshop. They're the guys who run the Big Church Raid. Speaking to Steve, and I said to him, Steve, do you think I could maybe host a launch party in the bookshop? And he said, no, not really. He said, I don't think that's the best place for you to do it. I think the best place for you to do it would be in your church. I said, okay, great. He said, but what I'm thinking is, he said, that no one really writes books on this topic. Would you be happy to be part of the Big Church Raid? And I will pay for the books that you have to buy from Instant Apostle.
Wow.
So I was like, thank you, God. Steve done that and the book got published. The cost of the 400 books got met. And then since then, there's been, it feels like miracle after miracle after miracle. Christianity magazine run an article on it. Stewardship, another really big organisation, they released a generosity report just before the book got released. Loads and loads and loads of other interviews. There was loads of publicity. There's quite a few conferences I've been asked to speak at and I got to speak at in the future. Lots of churches. There's been so much more of a response than what I imagined, because I thought it was only going to be me, my husband, and maybe my mum that ever read it.
Yeah.
God has been amazingly good. And it seems to be a message, the message of generosity, the history of tithing. Is tithing still relevant? How do we hear from God? All of this, all of the stuff that is in the book seems to be a message that people want to hear, which is good. Because it means actually I did hear from God. God knows what he's doing and God's timing is perfect.
If I put my training cap on as a training officer of years gone by, what you're saying is absolutely spot on. We have to facilitate if God gives you an idea, you're only part of that idea. God has other people as well that wants to be involved in it. If God says to you, I want you to form an army, well, you can't be an army of one, can you? You've got to get other people. So you shared it to other people and they brought their understanding of what you wanted to do, plus other ideas as well. And I think for those that listen today, if God has told you to do something, go and pray about it, but also then share it, because it's amazing what will come back and how that they can see the bigger picture. I think this is so important. The blessings that you have received from writing this book, I think blessings can be two ways. We can bless others, but we can also be blessed as well. You've seen it on both sides. What does blessing mean to you?
It is such an amazing and such a wide subject. So when all those survey results came back in, I asked for stories. What is your favourite story of generosity that has happened to you or someone you know? And those stories, they are a huge blessing to me. They're personal stories, they're individual stories of how God has moved in people's lives. I cannot tell you how much they have raised my faith level. I mean, I mentioned that we're having to sell our house now. Part of that process is that I have condensed my 5 days at the EA into 4 days, and I've opened my own consultancy business. Now, that is a word that someone spoke over me about 3-4 years ago. It's been endorsed by 2 or 3 people and then was confirmed by my CEO, whose suggestion it was that I condensed my days, open my own fundraising consultancy. There's been other people on the journey, and that has been the blessing. And I think if I take away one thing, and there's a whole myriad of things I could take away, but if I take away one thing, the blessing from writing the book and the journey that's continued after it has been the blessing of unity, the blessing of the Christian body, the blessing that we can be to each other, and how we need to ensure that we are always, always, always connected to the body, that we are always sharing with others, that we're always giving and receiving, because we're made to be in community, we're made to be in relationship. That is such an immense blessing, and that has carried me through the highs and the lows, and I know it will carry me through in the future as well.
Not just money, is it, that you can bless people with? It's time.
Time, talent and treasure is what I speak about. They're the 3 different ways, and every single one of us have the ability to bless with time, talent or treasure. Even those that say, I've got no money, I challenge you to buy the book and read the story about the lady who was sold into sex slavery by her dad so that he could settle his gambling debts, and how she then went on to bless her community as a retired lady living in London.
Wow.
That's just one of the stories in the book.
Excellent, because I like stories, and if it's good enough for Jesus and it's good enough for us, it's all very well just throwing Bible verse, but Jesus told stories to go with them, or parables as we call them. I think it's only fair that you plug the book. How can they get hold of it, and what's it called?
So the book is called Generous with a capital G. You can purchase it on Amazon, via the Big Church Read, or via my website, pawseyconsulting.com. And I know there's lots of Christian bookshops around the UK that are also stocking it.
You've mentioned you're now down to 4 days a week. You've got your own consultancy. I recently did a podcast with Wayne Jacobson, who was the co-writer of The Shack, and that went out 2 years ago. We've done a catch-up, and I said to him, where do you see yourself going in the next 2 years, Wayne? So we find out what happened because of the podcast, and it was not exactly where he thought it was going to be going. So if I ask you the same question, Wendy, where do you see yourself going?
Wherever God takes me. And that is such a cop-out answer, I know.
It's not.
So I'm going to be 49 in June. I think I'll probably retire around about 69, 70. Who knows what is going to happen in the future? I just think our Christian life, yes, there's going to be challenges, there's going to be battles, but it should be exciting. And if we follow what God's will is for our life, it will be exciting. I don't know, will I still be with the EA? Will I still be pastoring in Buckinghamshire? Will I still have my own consultancy? Who knows? I'm going to follow wherever he leads. And that for me is enough.
As you say, your house has to be sold. So where are you going to be going?
Well, we're planning to stay in the area. We don't feel called away from our church. We plan to stay in the area.
Until God says otherwise.
Yeah, until God says otherwise. I mean, if he sends us somewhere else, we will go. I just always want my life to just be in the centre of his will.
If I put you in my time machine that I bought off eBay and I take you back to when you were 16 and you can meet your 16-year-old self at the party, she doesn't know who you are, what would you say to her?
I would tell her to believe in herself, that life was going to get better, and to trust God. Now, 16-year-old me would probably sneer at a lot of that and think, silly old woman, what's she on about? But I would hope that some of it would stay true. And to be fair, I would tell 48-year-old me the same thing.
Well, it's been a phenomenal time. I thank you so much for sharing. Wendy Pawsey, the Reverend Wendy Pawsey. I doff my cap.
Really no need, but it was nice.
Reverend Wendy Pawsey, after everything you've been through, who is your Christian hero, please?
Okay, none of you will know her, but it is my nanny-in-law. So the lovely Ruth, the little lady who was pulling back the curtain and praying and waving, she is an inspiration. She's been promoted to glory, but she is an inspiration in that she loved her family. She didn't always get it right. You know, there was times when she got it wrong and she would apologize, but she served her church. She tried to incorporate her family into everything. She made sacrificial choices that would benefit others. And she spoke God's word into her family's life. Not in an aggressive way, not in an uncomfortable way, but in a natural, organic way. And because of that, she is my hero.
Please fly the flag a bit more, please, if that's right, with Ruth. Tell me a bit more about it, please.
Gosh, so I suppose I came into her life as a 16-year-old pregnant person. And all she ever showed me was immense love. When we was incredibly poor, she would bring bags of food up to our house. And we wasn't the only members of the family that she supported in this way. When she was younger, sort of in her 20s, 30s, 40s, she had some of her sister's children come and live with her. She's had her grandchildren come and live with her. She suffered an awful divorce, but she didn't let bitterness get into her heart. She remarried, returned to faith, and was just a joy to be around. You know, when you're around some people and they make you feel good about yourself?
Yes.
She was one of those people. And she had a wicked sense of humour. Not as in cruel, but as in just so incredibly funny.
Like, I can't get home from church all this week at the festivals. Yeah, someone has to come pick me up every night. Yeah. Oh, it's wonderful to hear people like that.
We was also involved with her in that she would look after our kids whilst me and Marcus went and taught youth. And, you know, she was always there. She would always go the extra mile, and we had loads of holidays with her. I don't know, she'd buy the kids an ice cream, or she was that type of nan. But there was some type of Jubilee event. I can't remember what it was now, but she invited the whole of her family, you know, her children, their children, their children. She invited us all round for a garden party, and she bought everyone something. You know, it was only stuff that she'd have got from down the market or wherever it was for the adults. We got cups, and the kids got commemorative coins. Obviously, Freya wasn't around at the time, but the boys were. We still got their commemorative coins. But she done it for everyone. She went the extra mile. She didn't need to do that. She could have just had us round and fed and watered us. And I think those type of people who go the extra mile, we need to celebrate them. We need to let them know they're appreciated and that we're noticing what they do.
I'm sure there are other Ruths out there.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Well, go and say hello to them. In fact, I challenge you to go to see this Ruth of yours and take a butterfly cake, see if you can make it fly. The book, again, should anybody want to get it, is called
Generous with a capital G.
Wendy, thank you for joining us today. It's been brilliant. God bless.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for inviting me on.
You're welcome. And if you haven't already, please could you hit the subscribe button? It would really mean a lot. Thank you very much indeed. Next time on Off-Grid Christianity.
Because I began to realise I had very sophisticated Christianity at one level, at a sort of a head level, but my heart, if you like, the centre core of who I am, even my emotions, had such a low level of confidence in God, or such a low level of peace. I might as well have been an atheist, you know. But what really opened me up to these people was that they told their stories and they had experienced worse burnout than I had. Because I was so used to so many speakers think they've got it all together, you know. But these people had actually experienced worse than I had. They'd been to the edge of suicide. The lady had actually thrown the Bible across the room at one point, saying there's no good in that at all, you know. So they're really raw, real. they had actually really challenged their spirituality. Is it good enough for our lives? And they thought, well, so it was no, but then they discovered a deeper thing that was good enough to meet their problems. So that's what really opened me up to then receive this teaching of the love of the Father, which is a very different paradigm than what we're used to.
So please join me with special guest, author, blogger and a team member of Father Heart Ministries, Stephen Hill. Until then, cheerio.